Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I am Adebola Adedugba. Here are stories making the rounds beyond the continent. Let's begin in Europe, where President Emmanuel Macron is facing an uphill battle as he tries to revive negotiations over a new government for France, with the leftist alliance refusing to take part after his rejection as candidate for prime minister. More than 7 weeks after an inconclusive parliamentary election that cost his allies their relative majority, Macron has still not named a new prime minister to take over from the current caretaker administration. The president said that he was meeting anyone who wants to come and work for the overriding national interest after several rounds of talks over the weekend, and Monday failed to produce a breakthrough. Macron told reporters at his palace office that work is going ahead and the door is open to prospective partners. In the meantime, French President Emmanuel Macron is urging Europe to intensify its efforts in the field of artificial intelligence, warning that the continent is falling behind China and the US in AI investment. Macron made these remarks during a visit to Serbia, where he highlighted the importance of Europe developing its own AI model. Macron's call for Europe AI model comes as the global race for AI dominance intensifies, with China and the US already making significant strides in the sector. Macron warns that Europe cannot afford to be left behind.
On a beaucoup d'opportunités et évidemment l'intelligence artificielle est en train de transformer, révolutionner beaucoup de choses. Mais nous, Européens, nous sommes un peu distancés. Il faut être lucide. Les Chinois et les Américains investissent beaucoup plus. Et je pense que nous, Européens, avons un rôle particulier à jouer. Parce que nous avons les capacités, la possibilité de faire et d'inventer notre modèle. Le modèle chinois de l'intelligence artificielle est totalement maîtrisé par le gouvernement, avec en quelque sorte des règles, des standards qui sont définis au sein d'un gouvernement central. Quand je dis ça, j'essaie de décrire, je ne juge pas. Le modèle américain est poussé, développé par l'innovation totalement privée, avec des choix qui sont faits, et on le voit d'ailleurs sur beaucoup de sujets, par les entreprises, oserais-je même dire par des entrepreneurs eux-mêmes. Et ce qu'on voit sur les plateformes va ensuite dériver sur l'intelligence artificielle, c'est-à-dire que le choix de quelques-uns peut structurer les choix collectifs. Nous croyons dans l'intelligence artificielle, mais nous pensons qu'il faut pour cela, en effet, que la discussion soit basée sur la science, qu'on définisse ensemble des standards et des solutions, et qu'elle soit pleinement européenne.
France is racing to contain the spread of diseases affecting sheep, ewes, and cattle. The government has ordered several million additional vaccines, which will be made available to farmers free of charge. This action comes in response to sharp rise in blue tongue serotype 3 outbreaks, which have nearly doubled in just a week, with 342 confirmed cases. The vaccines will be distributed across 70% of the country's department, including the Rollout and Pays de la Loire region. The government will also order 2 million doses of vaccine against epizootic hemorrhagic diseases. The Ministry of Agriculture is urging breeders to test their animals, with the government covering the costs of both the tests and veterinary visits.
Donc, dispositif vaccinal gratuit, élargissement de la zone pour courir devant la maladie, pour essayer de l'endiguer et de l'enrayer. Prise au travail pour regarder les pertes économiques et comment elles pourraient être prises en charge. J'en discuterai aussi, puisque j'aurai sans doute l'occasion de les voir avec un certain nombre de collègues européens, pour regarder quels sont les problèmes que ça pose au niveau européen. Et j'invite collectivement à ce qu'on ait une réflexion qu'on a lancée au ministère, mais sur laquelle il faut accélérer. On aura de plus en plus d'épisodes comme ça de maladies liées au dérèglement climatique. Il faut qu'on repense quand même, c'est le travail que j'ai lancé, dont je dis qu'il est vital pour l'agriculture, de qu'est-ce que c'est le sanitaire, qu'est-ce qui finance quoi et qu'est-ce qu'on fait, quelles sont les stratégies. Et la vaccination, c'est un veto qui disait ça tout à l'heure, c'est quand même la stratégie de base, parce qu'un animal qu'on ne vaccine pas, qui tombe malade, c'est de la perte économique. Le sanitaire, c'est pas pour embêter les gens.
And Russian bombardments on Friday killed 2 women and wounded 8 others in Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy. Authorities have urged residents of settlements near Russia's border to evacuate as tensions escalate. Sumy, located just across the border from Russia's Kursk region, has been a focal point since Kyiv launched a surprise offensive on August 6th, partly aimed at creating a buffer zone in Russia. Regional prosecutors confirmed that the body of a 37-year-old woman was recovered from the rubble of a building struck in Sumy. A 48-year-old woman later succumbed to her injuries in the hospital, while several others were wounded in the attack, which also ignited a fire. Regional authorities have called for the evacuation of people in 183 settlements near the Russian border in the Sumy region. And to unpack this, I'm joined by Bolu Michael B., who is a foreign policy analyst. Good evening. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right. Talk to me about the effect the latest Russian shelling of Ukraine has, especially on the Sumy region. I mean, what do you see in terms of dynamics playing out about Russia's military strategy?
Okay. First, the shelling of the city, of the region, and also the killing of civilians is a war crime. And if Putin is ever caught, he's going to be charged for crimes against humanity and other war crimes. And it's a sign of desperation. That's what countries that are desperate to win and they're losing ground, that's what they resort to. So it's a disregard for human life. And it seems that Russia's strategy has switched from capturing cities to destroying as many infrastructure as possible and also killing many civilians, which is quite unfortunate.
How about the overall picture now? Talking about Sumy, the region, how does it fit into the overall geography of the war? And what is its relevance when it comes to these Russian-Ukrainian conflicts?
Okay, you said the region of Sumy is in the northeastern part of Ukraine, and that proximity to Russia makes it a vulnerable region, and it's very important to Russia to capture that region because it's critical for the supply of weaponry to the Russian army, it could also be a diversionary tactic, which is used mostly by countries that are beginning to lose ground in war. They try to attack a particular city heavily so as to distract the opposition from moving their forces to concentrate on that region and thereby leaving other important areas vulnerable. So while the opponents are focusing on the new city that is being bombed heavily, the Russians can now attack the other Ukrainian cities that are vulnerable. So Ukrainian forces must be careful not to be caught unaware and believe strongly they are very aware of Russia's military tactics.
Well, talking about Ukraine being careful, how do you see this evolving as a result of Ukraine's counteroffensive, especially in the Kharkiv region? And does this mean Russia's military, what does this mean for the military posture of Russia?
Well, the implication, for Russia's military is that they are actually losing ground, and Kharkiv is also a very important city for Ukraine, the second largest or second biggest city of Ukraine, and it's a morale booster for the Ukrainian forces to have regained that city, because the Kharkiv is a very critical city or region or state in terms of Russia's military supply as well. So it gives them control or the ability to cut Russia's military supply. So it's a morale boost for the Ukrainian forces that we can marry that to what's going on in the Russian camp. While Ukraine is gaining grounds and retaking cities, Russia is jittery and acting desperate and killing civilians and losing ground. So which means that we might be closer to the end of this war with, things swinging in favor of Ukraine.
Now let's talk about conflict resolution now. How do you think the international community should intervene to prevent further escalation?
Now, we cannot deny the fact that, the whole world has been affected by this war in terms that Russia is a very big country, biggest country in the world. And, they also have, economic power in the supply major part of Europe, their gas, and they also control major trade routes, now that ships have to take like longer route and all that, they want to incur their costs in terms of goods and services. And we've seen the price of food rise all over the world. And we've also, in terms of international response, we've seen economic sanctions on Russia. We've seen humanitarian aid to Ukraine and military assistance to Ukraine as well, especially from the United States and the other Western allies. So even though this might sound positive to supporters of Ukraine, I think it's important to still try and explore diplomatic measures.
All right, thank you so much for your insight on the news. Bolu Michael B., foreign policy analyst, many thanks once again.
Thank you for having me.
And let's go on a short break. When we return, EU aims to train 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. We continue in Europe, where the European Union has set an ambitious goal to train 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers by the end of the year, significantly increasing its previous target of 60,000. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell announced a new objective following a meeting with EU defense ministers in Brussels. However, the training will not occur on Ukrainian soil due to concerns from some member states. Borrell highlighted the need for adapted and expedited training programs to address Ukraine's specific requirements. Borrell also urged EU member states to speed up arms deliveries to Ukraine in response to a request from Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. The EU plans to support Ukraine comes amid ongoing fierce fighting and calls for increased military aid. Spain's Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez has condemned the recent surge in violence in the occupied West Bank, where Israel is currently conducting a military operation. Alvarez warned that the escalation undermines the pursuit of peace and threatens viability of the two-state solution, which is essentially for stability in the Middle East. German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser announced on Friday that Berlin has deported Afghan criminals to Afghanistan for the first time since the Taliban seized power in 2021. The decision comes amid mounting pressure on the government to address migration concerns. Faeser said the law has been upheld and deportations will continue when there is a legal obligation to leave the country. This development comes just a week after a deadly knife attack in Tulagan claimed by the Islamic State group.
Sie haben gesehen, dass wir das Recht durchgesetzt haben und Straftäter aus Afghanistan zurückgeschoben haben. Aus meiner Sicht ist das notwendig, damit das Vertrauen weiter existiert in den Rechtsstaat. Und ich bin froh, dass wir das mit Partnern vollziehen konnten. Es gab keine direkten Kontakte Deutschlands mit Afghanistan oder Taliban. Also wir machen solche Abschiebungen immer nur rechtssicher. Das ist nach § 58 Aufenthaltsgesetz. Wenn vollziehbare Ausreisepflicht existiert, stellen wir sicher, dass wir das können. Es gibt keinen Abschiebestopp in Afghanistan, der das verhindert hätte. Insofern gehe ich auch davon aus, dass sie dort sicher sind. Wir wollen uns durch Terroristen nicht zurückdrängen lassen, unsere Art zu feiern hier in Deutschland mit aller Vielfalt, die unsere Gesellschaft bietet. Wir wollen das aufrechterhalten. Wir wollen dort nicht zurückweichen. Deswegen ist es aber wichtig.
And let's head to South America, where Venezuela is grappling with a nationwide power outage, leaving millions without electricity. The blackout, which started around 4:40 a.m. local time, is impacting all 24 states, with reports of both total and partial power loss. The government, led by President Nicolas Maduro, has attributed the outage to sabotage, a claim frequently made in response to unsubstantiated conspiracies. However, opposition leaders and experts argue that the real issues lie in corruption, inadequate investment, and a shortage of expertise in the country's electrical grid. Many fear that this blackout could be as severe as the 2019 outage, which lasted several days.
En Venezuela, se produjo en Venezuela un sabotaje eléctrico, un sabotaje contra el Sistema Nacional Eléctrico que ha afectado a casi todo el territorio nacional. Los 24 del mundo lo sepa, es un nuevo sabotaje eléctrico. Lo vivimos en el 2019, sabemos lo que nos costó en el 2019, sabemos lo que nos ha costado recuperar el sistema eléctrico nacional desde entonces y hoy estamos enfrentándolo con los protocolos antigolpe, porque lo que ha desde antes del 28 de julio, durante el 28 de julio y estos poco más de 30 días que han transcurrido, lo que hemos activado es un plan antigolpe, porque en lugar de asistir a unas elecciones el pasado 28 de julio, la opción del fascismo, de la extrema derecha, fue a destruir nuestras instituciones.
X, formerly known as Twitter, has said it expects to be blocked in Brazil after failing to meet a deadline to name a new legal representative for the company. The months-long row began with Supreme Court Judge Alexandra de Moraes in April, ordering suspension of dozens of X accounts for allegedly spreading disinformation. X owner Elon Musk has threatened to reactivate the account and has described Justice Moraes as a tyrant and dictator. Justice Moraes gave the 24 hours to name a new legal representative or face suspension. The order said a ban would remain in effect until X names a legal representative for the country and pays fines for alleged violation of Brazilian law. In Asia, Pacific leaders wrapped up a key summit in Tonga, endorsing a major joint policy initiative and rebuffing moves from China's regional allies to sideline long-term partner Taiwan. Leaders trickled back to capital Nuku'alofa after an overnight island retreat, using the tranquil surroundings to try to chart a new course through increasingly choppy waters. Security was a focal point at this year's Pacific Islands Forum, an unwilling bloc of U.S. partners, China friends, and states still tied to Taiwan. U.S. ally Australia convinced its Pacific neighbors to back a landmark plan, given it a greater role in training the region's police. The scheme would create up to 4 regional police training centers and a multinational crisis reaction force backed by $271 million in initial funding from Australia.
We have had a fruitful dialogue with a number of stakeholders, including the United Nations Secretary General, representatives from civil society and private sector, heads of our crop agencies, associate members, and foreign observers, as well as our forum dialogue partners. This week, I wanted to touch on the Pacific Policing Initiative. As you would know, Tonga, like many other countries, are facing a number of transnational security challenges, including seeing an increase in drug trafficking, cybercrimes within the Pacific in recent years. Tonga looks forward to continuing to work with Australia and forum members to bring this initiative to fruition. I thank you.
We welcome the opportunity to hear from and discuss issues in New Caledonia with President Macron in person. It was great to have him here. We're committed to sending the Forum Troika Plus, which is the members of the Troika and the added Prime Minister of Fiji, to the delegation to undertake a high-level mission as requested by President Macron.
After the break, UN Chief Guterres attends 25th referendum anniversary. Do stay tuned. Thank you for staying with us. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed the Parliament of East Timor as the country marks 25 years since a UN-backed vote ended a bloody, decades-long occupation by Indonesian forces and paved the way for it to become an independent nation. Timor-Leste has greatly inspired the UN in mediating solidarity at international level, Guterres says, adding the nation has evolved from a host country for peacekeeping forces to a country contributing personnel to UN peacekeeping missions in other countries.
Deu às Nações Unidas enorme impulso para a sua capacidade mediadora a nível internacional. É uma dívida que as Nações Unidas jamais poderão pagar em relação ao povo timorense. E no presente, Timor-Leste evoluiu de país de acolhimento de forças de manutenção da paz para país contribuinte de pessoal para missões de manutenção da paz da ONU noutros países, nomeadamente no Sudão do Sul.
Maybe compara ho in loron ita toba mo si toba loron sai lai ha provocação toba hitinho.
Still in Asia, families of victims of enforced disappearances in Bangladesh have held a rally to demand the return of their loved ones and called for former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to be put on trial. Hasina, who has been accused of being responsible for disappearances, fled to India earlier this month following weeks of student-led protests in Bangladesh. The protesters are seeking justice for their missing relatives and are pushing for Hasina to be held accountable for her actions. The rally takes place amid rising tensions in Bangladesh, with growing calls for Hasina to face trial for her alleged involvement in disappearances. And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen and do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adebola Adeduba. It's bye for now.